Well, welcome back. Episode 98 here of Countdown to Restoration, the show that is counting down the days of the Biden regime. And after today, you will be very glad that we are one day closer to being rid of this man who should have never been president. And I have my suspicions on how he got there. But anyway, as we continue to count down the days of the thief in chief. Yeah, the thief in chief. Yeah, he loves his job. Such a happy guy. And of course, the poster child for the wayward Biden regime, the man who thinks he's changing the world in the positive sense and reestablishing the name of the U.S., although diminishing it. The Biden regime's poster child, not this man's, he's diminishing it too. I mean, let's be honest, but Biden diminishing it. His regime, and this, the poster child of said regime. Dr. Rachel Levine, the man who would be a woman. That'd be an interesting movie, wouldn't it? Anyway, yesterday we had Bee Gees doing this song. Today, the Tavares. Just a little free, equal time. I always like their version better. It's just me. Bee Gees makes money on both of them, so I'll go ahead, guys. More than a woman. Much more. Anyway, we have some news that makes Dr. Rachel Levine happy, and I'm sure he probably gave his opinion on this. Transgender students protected at school by Title IX Department of Education says. They've been doing a review on this. Is there anyone who thought it wouldn't come out this way? And there's the bylines, USA Today. The rights of transgender and gay students are protected at school by Title IX, President Joe Biden's administration said Wednesday, reversing Trump-era guidance that said those students were not protected by any federal laws. The announcement from the Department of Education, and not that they weren't protected, as far as, this is federal laws, protected against discrimination based on sex. So now their pretend sex, which we call identity. Oh, it's my gender identity. I'm not pretending I'm a girl. That's my identity. Yeah, go to a secure location, a federally secure location, and tell them you work there because that's your identity. See how far that gets you as a transgender person. The announcement from the Department of Education comes not only during Pride Month, again planned, but also during a national debate over whether transgender athletes should be allowed to compete in sports that match their gender identity. Such debates have prompted a wave of anti-trans legislation from GOP-led state legislators. It's not anti-trans, it's pro-girl athlete. I mean, come on, it just makes sense. Here's how Title IX is used to protect trans students and female athletes. Or do they mean female athletes? The Biden administration plans to overturn Betsy DeVos's Title IX rule on campus sexual assault. Here's why the civil rights law is so controversial. And that sounds bad. What it is, a lot of campuses stop giving the accused even a chance to defend themselves. And so the Trump administration said that's not fair. That happened under Obama, that they just, because they push the rape culture so much on white males, they didn't even want anyone to have a chance to defend themselves. And who complained the most? The mothers of those white males. Like, he's accused, and now he's out of school. He didn't even get a hearing because they just believe what the girl said. So I don't, as a male or female, why you can't just, somebody's, oh, that guy raped me last night. Oh, well, let's throw him out. Come on. Today, the department makes clear that all students, including LGBTQ plus students, deserve the opportunity to learn and thrive in schools that are free from discrimination. Well, what about discriminating against cisgender girls, huh? Education Secretary Miguel Cardona said in a statement, the Supreme Court has upheld the right for LGBTQ plus people to live and work without fear of harassment, exclusion, and discrimination, and our LGBTQ plus students have the same rights and deserve the same protections. The interpretation of the law reverses guidance issued under, here, let me get the pink and blue flags up for you. The interpretation of the law reverses guidance issued under former President Donald Trump, whose administration rescinded guidelines that said Title IX applied to discrimination based on gender identity. That thing we used to go by, but not any longer. Transgender students are protected at school against discrimination, President Joe Biden's administration said Wednesday. Here, people hold the transgender. I don't know what they were doing in this article. It's all over the place. I'm not sure. Wednesday's news comes 1 year after the Supreme Court ruled gay and transgender workers are protected by the Civil Rights Act, which is expired. Which one is that? Anyway, legislation that bans discrimination in the workplace. The Education Department's interpretation suggests gay and transgender students will have those same protections in school. The Trump administration had previously threatened to withhold federal funding from schools that allowed transgender students to participate in school sports. They can participate. See, that is not right reporting. They can participate. They could participate just in their biological gender category. All right. Boys that pretend to be girls couldn't go and play girls' sports, etc. What's not clear, however, is what this new interpretation means for those anti-trans bills and whether and how the Department of Education might enforce its ruling. The Biden administration signaled early in its term that it would review Trump-era changes to Title IX, the 1972 law prohibiting sex-based discrimination in schools. The president signed an executive order in spring and established the White House Gender Policy Council to advance gender equality, combat systemic bias, and also focus on transgender rights. So, one of the many councils at the White House. Bye, Doc. Have a nice day. Remember this, transgender Dems of America. I'm sure there's Secular Dems of America, seculardems.org. You must understand them to understand what we're going through. They love abortion, and so they love this ruling. Appeals court deals blow to abortion opponents in North Carolina case. They struck down the North Carolina law that banned abortions after 20 weeks. Of course, this is on the way to the Supreme Court, I would imagine. They won't like this at all. Abbott, governor of Texas, signs religious freedom law prohibiting government from closing places of worship like they did during the pandemic, and that's a law every state should have. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a law prohibiting government agencies and officials in the state from ordering churches and other houses of worship to close. Lone Star State's governor announced the move in a tweet on Tuesday. pledging that Americans' First Amendment freedoms would be protected in the state by prohibiting the government from issuing orders that close or have the effect of closing places of worship in the state. And that is a right and proper thing to do. This just because these people are also for the legalization of marijuana. GM, this is probably true. GM's policy on cannabis use partly to blame for worker shortage, according to the United Auto Workers Union. They're saying that since GM still drug tests potential applicants or hirees, and part of the drug test is cannabis, that's why they're having a worker shortage. They're going to have to allow for people to smoke pot. And maybe so. I don't know. The whole world's going to pot. Bad pun, but true. This just a few things in kind of the, okay, let's throw it out there stuff. Governor Nunn slams Biden over White House fireworks event. What a hypocrite, she says. And yeah, because maybe you watched last year, my wife and I did, that great 4th of July show from Mount Rushmore when we still had a president worth saluting. That was a great show. Well, the Biden regime has said, no, can't do it. Too big of a chance of wildfires, climate change, Native Americans don't like it. There might be a hummingbird in the area, something like that, but we can't do it. But the White House has announced, hey, we're going to have a big fireworks show. I wonder whom they're copying, because Trump had a great fireworks show at the White House, didn't he? Yeah. Biden will probably be out there, ooh, fireworks. Anyway, that wasn't nice, but it's probably true. I'm going to write in and complain about the host of this show. I am, I tell you. All right, this is just out there. I didn't know. We missed it. I didn't know. June 12th is Loving Day. I have heard this before, actually, when interracial marriage finally became legal in the U.S. So, hey, missed Loving Day. Sorry, I didn't know. Senate approves bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. My June what? That's the day. I think it was the 17th. I always get confused between the 17th and 19th. Both dates are important in this. It's the day when Texas slaves learned they were free. Texas being at the bottom of the country at that time, still is, isn't it? But only in geographical location. News hadn't got here, and all those bad Texas rebels were still holding out until the Union Army came and let the slaves know that they're free. So the Emancipation Proclamation had already been given, everybody, so anyway. So now it'll be a federal holiday because I know Biden will approve it in a big ceremony, and why not? I don't have a problem with it. Most people don't even know what it is, though. And this just to show you what's wrong with the country. CBS excuses Walgreens shoplifter in viral video. You're getting probably something you need. If you saw that, I'm not playing it. I could, but everybody else has. So it's a shoplifter in a Walgreens with a grocery cart going through the aisles and just filling stuff in a big black garbage bag. And finally, when he's leaving, because you can't do anything about it, because they won't prosecute in in where were they? San Francisco. They won't prosecute. The DA there won't prosecute unless it's like around $950. So there's nothing they can do. Police don't even try to stop. The policeman knocked the bag off the cart as the guy was running out, and he's doing all that with the cop standing there. So, that's fun in San Francisco. Don't want a store there. Okay, now we have some various news items. The Fed, the Federal Reserve Chair and governors, holds rates steady but raises inflation expectations sharply and sees hikes in 2023. They don't want to raise interest rates till 2024, but they say inflation is here. So federal judge issues preliminary block to Biden administration's ban on oil and gas leases because there were many states that were affected and they are suing. And he, the judge, being a Trump appointee, is being good to his, background and saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't just go cutting it off because you don't like it. Rents for single-family homes just saw the largest gains in nearly 15 years, the rent price. It's really getting expensive out there. Part of that is because of this pandemic and also because of the cost of building new homes. Single-family rents were up 5.3% year over year in April, rising from a 2.4% increase in April 2020, according to CoreLogic. That is the largest annual gain in nearly 15 years. Regionally, by top 20 metropolitan markets, rent gains were highest in Phoenix. And next to them, Tucson, I think it was. So you don't want to go there. And I realize this probably would have happened no matter who is president. But since Biden's taking claim for everything else that happens under his watch, hey, it's on him, isn't it? Yeah. Try to be fair about that, but he won't be fair. Eviction ban, the federal eviction ban expires, I think, in 5 days, something like that. 14 days. I can read, it just takes me a moment. With eviction ban expiring in 14 days, many states have given out under 5% of rental assistance. And that's where the 5 came from. You understand landlords and everything, but a lot of people fell behind because they couldn't work. Not because they wouldn't work. Nobody let them go work. And so if there's money for that, they need to help, because this is something I and others like me said early on. There will be a massive amount of evictions, which is why they instituted the ban, because they'd ended up throwing people out on the street in the height of the pandemic when everything was closed down. What are you going to do? I mean, this country hurts so many people. States, I do not know how in good conscience, and unless you go and look over somebody's finance, say, okay, you had the money, you just didn't pay it. I can understand that. But when people are put out of work by order of governments, those governments should cover that rent. I'm telling you, that's it's not fair. A lot of people are hurting, as they all say, through no fault of their own, but very few people help them. Just one bit of COVID news today. If I can get myself back to proper size there. The Delta COVID variant now accounts for 10% of new U.S. cases, and that is rising. And the vaccines aren't entirely effective against that. So watch out. You might want to wear your mask. Make sure you wash your hands. Stay at least 60 feet from everybody. Cough into your elbow. And never go outside. So you'll probably be closed down again. So anyway, pay your rent. John Kerry time as we look at some environmental news from the statue himself, John Kerry. Did I tell you the Republicans have sent a letter to the White House asking just what he does? What John Kerry's role is, how he has a role, how he's getting paid, etc., expenses. They would like to know, why is this guy back in government? This is interesting. A company is producing thousands of cheap floating nuclear reactors. Yeah, there they are. They look like, just a little container ship. While wind turbine and solar power platforms are beginning to take to sea, another more established form of power might also avoid hiking real estate costs, because not everybody wants to live next to a nuclear power plant. But these little things, they float, and even if they spill, it's okay, and you can put them on land too. because they have protective mechanisms that are really amazing and will generate a whole lot more power than wind or solar, and are quite safe, and is really what we should have done in the beginning, was go to nuclear, but no, can't do that. We'd have all this taken care of. All right, guess what time it is, ladies and gentlemen?
Come ride the little train that is rolling down the tracks to the junction. Forget about your cares, it is time to relax at the junction. Lots of curves, you bet, and even more when you get to the junction.
Petticoat Junction.
There's a little hotel called the Shady Rest at the junction.
Petticoat Junction.
It is run by Kate. Come and be her guest at the junction.
Petticoat Junction.
And that's Uncle Joe. He's a moving kind of slow at the junction. Petticoat Junction.
Petticoat Junction. Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe. Moving slow. You might remember yesterday in our God Formation segment, I told you that leaders at the G7 were laughing at Biden and shaking their heads not only at his ideas, but as his apparent mental state, physical and mental abilities would wane from time to time. Well, we have some affirmation of that. You think I just sit here and say things, but no, I have good sources, a great source. At G7, Biden is slow, confused, and seemingly dazed. Wow. Yeah, it's like they copied me, isn't it? Probably did. This by Tammy Bruce, so it is an opinion, but it was in the Washington Times. And Tammy Bruce, of course, is a conservative and not at all friendly to Biden, but this is what happened. I'm going to get in trouble with mom and dad if I don't do this the right way. This could be a normal comment by a 10-year-old who is being allowed to handle the microwave for the first time, but now replace the words mom and dad with the staff. And what you have is a verbatim statement from President Biden speaking to a gaggle of international media at the G7 summit. Well, he only called on certain ones. Mr. Biden's overseas trip joining the G7 summit has been nothing less than a catastrophe, peppered throughout with reminders to the world that the American president is not just following the instructions and orders of a faceless staff, but there might be a good reason for this to be the case. Yes, there is good reason for that to be the case. You don't want to let this man decide his own life, which means deciding ours. For the times when the media was allowed in to be present at the G7 interaction, Mr. Biden exhibited cognitive deficiencies that are not just an embarrassment, but must be considered a national security risk for no other reason than the comfort and inspiration it must give to our enemies. Hear, hear, Tammy Bruce. That is exactly right. The meeting, hosted by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson in Cornwall, England, issued several alarms about Mr. Biden's condition. In an episode garnering international attention during a statement to the media, perplexed Mr. Biden confused Libya with Syria no less than 3 times in a 90-second period. A spokesman later confirmed the president meant Syria when he mentioned Libya repeatedly. The confusion was not the only concern. Throughout his delivery and demeanor were often confused, slow, and seemingly dazed. Yes, they were, as we noticed as we saw segments of the press conference. I saw the whole thing. Maybe you just saw what was here. Lucky you. For those who might have thought Mr. Biden's puzzlement due to those serious Syria-Libya remarks were one of a kind, off to be dismissed as fatigue suffered by an elderly man during a long trip. More disturbing behavior was observed during a roundtable discussion led by Mr. Johnson. Yeah. Of course, we're going to have a lot of Biden-Putin stuff in just a minute, so hang on. It'll get a lot of fun. Really will. It is. Yeah. There's a good part. And as Mr. Johnson was concluding the introductions, Mr. Biden interrupted aggressively, pointing to President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, who was sitting directly across from Mr. Biden, and said with a firm tone, as though he was ordering Mr. Johnson, that he introduce the president of South Africa. Mr. Biden then clenched his fist and pumped them as though he had done the South African leader a favor. And I saw that on video. It's really embarrassing. Though no doubt to the delight of everyone who prefers to see the United States of America embarrassed and weak, Mr. Johnson had to interrupt Mr. Biden to tell him he had already introduced the South African. Then everyone around the table, the leaders of the G7 representing the core of our allies, laughed. They were not laughing with Mr. Biden. They were laughing at him and ultimately at us. Two possibilities exist to explain this. Either Mr. Biden did not know Mr. Ramaphosa's name, whom Mr. Johnson clearly introduced just seconds earlier, and the only black participant at the table, or he genuinely had no clue what had just transpired despite sitting next to Mr. Johnson. Like having a toddler escape from the children's table in another room and sneaking onto the adult table, Mr. Johnson then twice had to shush Mr. Biden with a hand gesture to keep him from continuing to interrupt. Is there any other president in American history whom any other leader would have been comfortable shushing? Or who would have allowed it? Donald Trump, Barack Obama, either Bush, Bill Clinton, either Roosevelt? One thinks not. Obama would have been highly insulted. At one point during the summit, Mr. Biden was seen, this is sad, at a casual dining area in a suit paired with white sneakers, alone, wandering aimlessly, giving the impression he was lost. A reporter then shouted a question at him, at which point Mrs. Biden ran up onto the dining platform from an offside location, grabbing him by the hand, saying, "Come on." The tendency of some may be to see these episodes as I told you so moments, or to use them as convenient and appropriate political arguments about the serious problems coming from the Biden administration, but we say regime. But the most serious issues separate from the American people's embarrassment are the national security implications. How would that hurt national security? Tammy goes on to explain. Events like the public G7 conference are in a large part a public relations theater, demonstrating to the world the unity of these global allies and the power of leadership of the United States of America in particular. Meanwhile, there are tyrants, monsters around the world watching as well. Russia, China, Al-Qaeda, North Korea, and Iran, no doubt, are enjoying themselves immensely, realizing American leadership is not in any way prepared to deal with a serious black swan event challenging the global feckless order. I'm not sure how she feels about this, but the Macrons, Merkels, Johnsons of the world may want to check their glee and consider if the American president doesn't know what's happening from one moment to the next, what happens when China decides now is the time to invade Taiwan, or if Russia decides with a bewildered American president being pushed around by flustered bureaucrats, this would be the perfect time to invade Ukraine. Or if the North Korea lunatics decide there is no time like the present to teach Japan a lesson. We've already seen what Mr. Biden's presence on the scene has encouraged Iran to pursue. Its death squad Hamas already attacked Israel with thousands of missiles, as they too were looking forward to a return to normal. What we must hope for at this point is any damage being done can be somehow contained while we pressure good people on both sides of the aisle to admit and recognize the national security implications of the penny dreadful theater troupe currently running the country. And as I said, that is from Tammy Bruce. Normally we don't do we have done some opinion pieces, but I thought that was a pretty good one. So anyway, and then we have this political cartoon. It says, meanwhile, on the world stage, little note on Biden's back: if lost, please return to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest Washington, D.C. Dr. Jill Biden. So, it's pretty sad, ladies and gentlemen. And this is Putin and Biden sat down today. I'm get some media scuffle breaks out at Biden-Putin summit. Russia security had to get down there and intervene. The media is treating them like they're rock stars or something. I don't know. Due to time, we won't go into it any further than that. And now, guess what? Your favorite person to see on a little video clip, and mine, if I can, nothing wants to work. All right. Some of this you just got to watch and say, that's our guy, Joe.
As usual, folks, they gave me a list of the people I'm going to call on. So, Jonathan, Associated Press.
Thank you, sir. U.S. intelligence has said that Russia tried to interfere in the last two presidential elections, and that Russia groups are behind hacks like SolarWinds and some of the ransomware attacks you just mentioned. Putin, in his news conference just now, accepted no responsibility for any misbehavior. Your predecessor opted not to demand that Putin stop these disruptions. So what is something that concrete, sir, that you achieved today to prevent that from happening again, and what were the consequences you threatened?
Whether I stopped it from happening again, he knows I will take action, like we did when this last time out. What happened was we, in fact, made it clear that we were not going to continue to allow this to go on. The end result was we ended up withdrawing them. They ended up withdrawing ambassadors. We closed down some of their facilities in the United States, etc. He knows there are consequences. Now, look, one of the consequences that I don't know, I shouldn't say this, it's unfair of me. I suspect you may all think doesn't matter. But I'm confident matters to him, and to other world leaders of big nations. His credibility worldwide shrinks. Let's get this straight. How would it be if the United States were viewed by the rest of the world as interfering with the elections directly of other countries, and everybody knew it? What would it be like if we engaged in activities that he is engaged in? It diminishes the standing of a country that is desperately trying to make sure it maintains its standing as a major world power. And so it's not just what I do, it's what the actions that other countries take, in this case Russia, that are contrary to international norms. It's the price they pay. They are not able to dictate what happens in the world. There are other nations of significant consequence, i.e. the United States of America being one of them.
Mr. President, just a quick follow on the same theme.
The man actually thinks Putin's going to stop being Putin because it makes him look bad. Actually, that's his plan, ladies and gentlemen. And the reporter lied. Trump did tell Putin to stop doing things. But Biden, he feels like that, and we'll find out later even about China. No, they don't want to look bad to the rest of the world. You guys don't get it. Yeah, well, let's see what the Everly brothers have to say about that.
All I have to do is dream. Dream, dream, dream.
That's what I thought, Don and Phil. The Everly Brothers, thanks. Little cameo there, which is really interesting since I think at least one is dead. But anyway, the man's a dreamer and not the good kind. I'm telling you, this whole regime is full of people that think you rub magic pixie dust together and spread it around, and the whole world comes by and skipping and dancing and saying, let's just all get along. He doesn't want to look bad. Jeez. I don't know of any U.S. president that's ever had that for oh, come on. Where are we at now? Some comparisons here.
The third one, yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, when President Putin was questioned today about human rights, he said the reason why he's cracking down on opposition leaders is because he doesn't want something like January 6th to happen in Russia. And he also said that he doesn't want to see groups formed like Black Lives Matter. What's your response to that, please?
My response is kind of what I communicated, that I think that's a ridiculous comparison. It's one thing for literally criminals to break through cordon, go into the Capitol, kill a police officer, and be held unaccountable. And it is for people objecting and marching on the Capitol and saying, you are not allowing me to speak freely. You are not allowing me to do A, B, C, or D. And so they're very different criteria.
Now, I'm going, because as you know, or may not know, or you will now, the team refused to have a joint press conference with Putin. For obvious reasons, Putin would have wiped the floor with Biden. And plus, Biden wouldn't have been able to just call on select reporters. Now, this same reporter from ABC asked Putin a similar question. And for some reason, I could not get it with the audio of the question. But she just really lit into him. You know, you've got Alexei Navalny, he's being held back. You've made, you're shutting down freedom of the press, et cetera, et cetera. And so, man, are you going to change what you're doing? Now, listen to Putin. Now, Putin, I'm just going to tell you, he gives a better overall view of some conditions in the U.S. than this regime does. And no, I'm not a Putin fan. I'm just telling you, this is the way it is.
Well, let me just reiterate what I've just said on the so-called, quote-unquote, foreign agents and people who portray themselves as the non-systemic opposition. I think I've responded to your CNN colleagues. But I think these are the rules of the game, so I have to repeat it when I repeat it to your question. Okay, fine by me, I can do it. The United States has a law that spells out that the United States will support specific entities and organizations in Russia. At the same time, the Russian Federation was labeled as an adversary. They went on the record and said publicly that they will stymie the development of Russia. It begs the question, what kind of organizations the United States and the West will be supporting and pay them if we are an adversary? It's quite clear that, like the United States back in the 30s, we've labeled them as foreign agents, but we haven't banned them. I mean, they can operate, all right. If you're labeled as a foreign agent, that does not preclude you from operating in the country. Well, if it's an extremist organization, that's a whole new story, whole different story. The organization is in question publicly has called for riots and public disorder. It has openly instructed people on how to make Molotov cocktails, so to use them against the law enforcement. It called for the participation of underage person in riots. America has just recently went through grievous chain of events after a certain African-American individual was killed, and an entire movement the Black Lives Matter movement appeared. I'm not going to go into details. I will spare you them. But we've seen pogroms. We've seen, looting and violations and riots. We sympathize with the Americans, but we do not want for the same thing to happen on the Russian soil, and we'll do anything possible to prevent this. And it's not about me fearing anything. If you want to think that, can you please give the mic? All right, about my opponents being jailed or imprisoned. People went into U.S. Congress with political demands. 400 people are now facing criminal charges. They are facing prison terms of up to 20 or maybe 25 years. They are called homegrown terrorists. They are being accused of many other things. 70 people were arrested right there on the spot. 30 of them are still arrested. On what grounds? Not quite clear. I mean, none of the official authorities from the states are informing us about it, so we don't know that. One of the participants, a woman, was shot dead on the spot. She was not threatening with, with arms or anything. Why am I bringing this up? Many people are facing the same things as we do, and I am stressing this. We are sympathizing with the United States, but we do not want the same thing repeating here. A couple of more questions, please.
Now, do I think that Putin is just trying to keep law and order in his country? No, he is obviously shutting down political enemies and doing many things because he's Putin. I mean, that's what they do. But is he sounding a little correct on some things that are happening here? Yes. Does Biden? No. No. See, Biden never mentions the protester or, trespasser, whatever you want to call her, who was shot and killed for no reason by a police officer. The family of that woman still doesn't even know the police officer's name, who's completely exonerated. Maybe so. I mean, I don't know. And why was just that one person shot? Why didn't he shoot everybody? I haven't understood that. You know? And, of course, Biden said, they killed a police officer. No, it's been proven even in the autopsy, the police officer died and not from what happened on that day. But anyway, well, maybe he died from it, but not, or because of it, but ladies and gentlemen, the thing is, you can't just dismiss. See, Biden and the team and liberals, they dismiss everything because they say, oh, we're not Russia. But there's a lot of things that are pretty similar there. Now, again, was the people invading the Capitol? Yeah, that was wrong. Went over that before. But there's a lot of similarities here, ladies and gentlemen. And even Putin can see that, even though his motives are wrong. The guy's horrible. I'm not arguing that. I wouldn't turn my back on him. What do we have now? Oh, on the free press.
Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty.
Hello, Mr. President. Hello, Mr. President.
You want to go in the shade? You can. Can you see?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So I think attacks in civil society and the free press continue inside Russia.
Yes.
For example, Radio Free Europe.
Yes.
Radio Liberty, Voice of America, Current Time TV channel where I work, branded foreign agents, and several other independent media. So we are essentially being forced out in Russia 30 years after President Yeltsin invited us in. My question is, after your talks with President Putin, how interested do you think he's in improving the media climate in Russia?
I wouldn't put it that way. In terms of improving the climate, I would, in fact, put it in terms of how much interest does he have in burnishing Russia's reputation that is viewed as not being contrary to democratic principles and free speech. That's a judgment I cannot make. I don't know. But it's not because I think he's interested in changing the nature of a closed society or closed government's actions relative to what he thinks is the right of government to do what it does. It's a very different approach. There's a couple really good blogs. I told him I read most everything he's written and the speeches he's made, and I've read a couple very good biographies, which many of you have as well. And I think I pointed out to him that Russia had an opportunity, that brief shining moment after Gorbachev and after things began to change drastically, to actually generate a democratic government. But what happened was it failed, and there was a great race among Russian intellectuals to determine what form of government would they choose and how would they choose it. And based on what I believe Mr. Putin decided was that Russia has always been a major international power when it's been totally united as a Russian state, not based on ideology, whether it was going back to Tsar and commissars straight through to the revolution, the Russian Revolution, and to where they are today. And I think that it's clear to me, and I've said it, that I think he decided that the way for Russia to be able to sustain itself as a great, quote, great power is to, in fact, unite the Russian people on just the strength of the government. The government controls, not necessarily ideologically, but the government. And I think that's the choice that was made. I think I'm not going to second guess whether it could have been fundamentally different, but I do think it does not lend itself to Russia maintaining itself as one of the great powers in the world.
Now, you may think, what? Well, of course, Russia doesn't want a free press. They never have. And all right, Putin was talking about some of that. Labeling them foreign actors puts them, means they're working for foreign governments and they can monitor them differently, etc. But you notice that Biden is talking against the government ruling and bringing people together under the name of the government. And isn't that what they're doing? No, we're the government. We know what's best for you. That's what Obama did. That's what the Biden regime is doing big time. And also, he's talking about a free press. And what does Biden do all the time? He has a list of reporters to call on. And I realize we're not as bad as Russia. Again, I am not pro-Russia. I don't trust them. They do, they've got their agenda, we've got ours. But we're heading the same way. And Biden's doing the same things. Or somebody behind him is. And he's talking about things, as our good friend would say.
You don't know what you're talking about, do you, sir?
And of course, they were talking about Boris Yeltsin. You may or may not remember him, depending on your age. All right. So, as we saw, he is trying to walk away, and a couple of questions come through. And finally, Peter Doocy from Fox, whom Biden has not called upon once during this European farce that he has, been on. Peter Ducey breaks through. And then we have a great one at the end, so don't go away. It is a lot of fun.
Conversation today, did you, in terms of the red lines that you laid down, is military response an option for a ransomware attack? And President Putin had called you in his press conference an experienced person. You famously told him he didn't have a soul. Do you now have a deeper understanding of him after this meeting?
Thank you very much.
But on the military response, sir?
No, we didn't talk about military response.
In the spirit, Mr. President, you say that there is no substitute for face-to-face dialogue. And also with what you said at NATO, that the biggest problems right now are Russia and China. You've spoken many times about how you have spent perhaps more time with President Xi than any other world leader. So is there going to become a time where you might call him old friend to old friend and ask him to open up China to the World Health Organization investigators who are trying to get to the bottom of COVID-19?
Let's get something straight. We know each other well. We're not old friends. It's just pure business.
So I guess my question would be, you've said that you were going to press China. You signed on to the G7 communique that said the G7 were calling on China to open up to let the investigators in. But China basically says they don't want to be interfered with anymore. So what happens now?
The impact, the world's attitude toward China as it develops. China's trying very hard to project itself as a responsible and a very, very forthcoming nation. That they are trying very hard to talk about how they're taking and helping the world in terms of COVID-19 and vaccines, and they're trying very hard. Look, certain things you don't have to explain to the people of the world. They see the results. Is China really actually trying to get to the bottom of this? One thing we did discuss, as I told you, in the EU and at the G7 and with NATO, what we should be doing and what I'm going to make an effort to do is rally the world to work on what is going to be the physical mechanism available to detect early on the next pandemic and have a mechanism by which we can respond to it and respond to it early. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And we need to do that. Thank you.
All I have to do is dream. Dream, 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 dream.
Dreaming again. I mean, he's like talking from 30 years ago. China's trying to develop. If China develops anymore, I mean, they don't care what the world says. They know they have power. What's he talking about? Oh, you get the idea here what he's talking about. Now, I recognize her voice. I think she's a CBS reporter. I tried to find her real quick. I just didn't. I got tired of looking because I was coming up on press time, as we say in the biz. Actually, just said that for the first time. Anyway, he gets mad. Comes toward her. If Trump ever did this to any reporter, especially a female reporter, it would be all over. This question got him big time. And I don't even know why.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident he'll change behavior. What do you do over there? What did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to
What I said was, I said what will change their behavior is that the rest of the world reacts to them and they diminish their standing in the world.
Just stating the facts.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks. He downplayed human rights abuses. He even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin framed it?
Did you
It's a summit with China.
Ugh. Right in her face, shaking his finger. I mean, that made him mad. Why the hell you stay there? Because everybody's been asking. They want to know, what makes him think he's going to change anything? See, they knew nothing was going to change. This is why the team and even those over the team didn't want this. But it's too late. Biden stuck his foot in their mouth. All right, we have another question for Putin. And I think this is a good one because it kind of shows both sides of the issue again. Because Biden was asked about a couple of American prisoners being held in Russia. One, a former Marine that actually was on the detail guarding the vice president. And he asked about, and he did say he was going to keep after that and try to help. But here's a question I wasn't expecting.
Good day, Mr. Larue, Izvestia newspaper. Did you manage to agree with the U.S. side on the return of certain Russian citizens that are jailed in U.S. prisons? And if it is the case, when could it happen? Indeed, we brought this up, and President Biden brought this up with regard to U.S. citizens that are currently in Russian prisons, and we discussed this. There could be some ground for compromise. Russian Foreign Ministry and the U.S. State Department will work in this direction.
So, Biden never says, oh, there's some he's asked about, some we've asked about. All right. So, anyway, they're working on it. So, I just thought it'd be interesting to see both sides of the coin there. And if I'm a Russian patriot, I'm thinking we look a little stronger than the U.S. But anyway, let's do this quick. As we are coming up upon time restraints, well, China wants to look so good to the world and put out a good face and all that. China sends record 28 fighter jets toward Taiwan. This happened on Tuesday, so the regime would have known about it. And, you know, it's just their way of saying, hey, G7, Biden, take this. China flew a record 28 fighter jets toward the self-ruled island of Taiwan on Tuesday, the island's defense ministry said, the largest such display of force since Beijing began sending planes on a near daily basis last year. Taiwan's Air Force deployed its combat air patrol forces in response and monitored the situation in the southwestern part of the island's air defense identification zone with its air defense systems, the Ministry of National Defense said. So, China, worried about what the world thinks about them, huh, Mr. President? Jeez. And then one more foreign affair we got to get in because neither Israel nor Hamas is too respectful of the pretend president. Israel responds to arson balloons with airstrikes on Gaza in first flare-up since ceasefire. They're just not going to stop on either side. Come on. Israel carried out airstrikes on the Gaza Strip early Wednesday. Actually, they hit abandoned buildings, as you know, after militants in the Palestinian territory sent incendiary balloons into the south of the country. It was the first flare-up between the two sides since a major conflict in May in which hundreds were killed. The strikes were also the first under Israel's new coalition government headed by Naftali Bennett, who took over on Sunday after ousting former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they came as more than 1,000 ultra-nationalist demonstrators. Ultra-nationalists. They're celebrating the reunification of Jerusalem. Ultra-nationalists. bearing Israeli flags poured into Jerusalem's Flashpoint Old City on Tuesday, with scores of police deployed and international monitors urging calm. Yeah, Hamas didn't like it. And so they started, they get, I think I've got a picture of the balloons. Do we? Maybe not. I don't know. No, that's just the bombing. I had a picture of the balloons. I don't know what I did with it. Anyway, what they do, they tie a bunch of balloons together, helium-filled balloons, and they tie explosive devices or like Molotov cocktails on the bottom of it and just let it go into the wind. And wherever it lands, sets on fire. There's lots of fires burning and everything. And as of yet, we have not condemned that I'm aware of. And so anyway, we have a lot of border news, and I'm just going to show you one real quick, and then we'll get on. And we did have tacos last night for Taco Tuesday, but not from Taco Bell. Actually, I got to do a couple of things, and then we'll look at more. Statement by President Joseph R. Biden Jr. on DACA Day. That's right. You didn't know there was a DACA Day, did you? Dreamers are Americans. Many have spent most of their lives in the United States. They live, study, work, and worship in our communities. They have served on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2012, the Obama-Biden administration created the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, policy. Since that date, DACA has allowed more than 800,000 immigrant youth who came to the United States as children to temporarily remain in our country, work lawfully, pursue their education, and long for the day they can become citizens. We've also allowed their parents and most of their family members to stay, but that's obviously beside the point. 20 years ago, oh, come on. 20 years ago, Congress introduced the first version of the Bipartisan DREAM Act led by Senator Durbin, a Democrat of Illinois, and former Republican Senator Hatch. And over the years, bipartisan coalitions of lawmakers championed the bill. The American public overwhelmingly supports this legislation, but time and time again, the Senate has failed to act. No, American public overall does not really support this legislation. Only Congress can provide a permanent legislative fix to provide lasting stability for these young people and their families. My immigration bill, the U.S. Citizenship Act, creates a pathway to citizenship for undocumented individuals in our country, not just DACA, but all of them, including Dreamers. In March, the House took a critical first step and passed the American Dream and Promise Act. Congress must find a way to pass these legislative solutions, and I will continue to work towards passage of legislation protecting dreamers and creating a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. These young people represent the best of America, and we can't let them down. See, it doesn't just stop with them, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not only to them anyways, to them and their family. See, you don't hear that. And of course, it's to everybody who comes across the border. A lot more on that tomorrow. Let me show you one thing, though, which Kamala Harris hates. Where is that picture? Oh, yeah. And Governor Abbott today, big thing, talking about building the wall. Trump to visit decimated Mexico border with Texas Governor Abbott on June 30th. June 30th. So look forward to that. It's be a lot of questions about that in the old White House press briefing room. Now we've got some God formation to give you, and then we'll be off a little earlier today, so you have a few extra minutes to spend time praying for the country. Oh, not you? Yeah, he's glad. Oh, wrong guy. Hey, you don't get paid extra for that. All right, some God formation time, and Wow, I told you about Biden being laughed at and everything. You didn't believe me. Maybe you did you? Oh, I feel better now. Okay. They are very afraid of Putin, and always have been, for the one reason, for this one reason. This is interesting. That Biden thinks he is Putin's equal. Really. They are not afraid of him. I'm not sure what I wrote there. They're not afraid of because he is quiet and doesn't make and is more careful. They're not afraid of him because he's quiet and doesn't make stupid statements and is more careful. They're afraid that because Biden says everything in the world. Okay, they are not afraid because of Biden. Because anyway, I just did not write that well. But so Biden can talk about him, but Putin is stronger and more forceful. So anyway, Biden thinks he's up to the challenge, and unfortunately, Biden's the only one that knows he's not. Sorry about massacring that. I always think I'll be able to read my writing, and then I can't. There is talk of an administration defection. Someone that leaves to tell. Yeah, you know how they did in the Trump regime? Administration, I'm sorry. That's an administration. This is a regime. There's somebody here who already wants to leave to get a little book deal. But only a few are allowed to leave. It's like the Hotel California. You can check out any time you want, but you can never leave. They are making it known that talking after leaving is a punishable offense. I don't know how they do that. Everybody that leaves talks. But anyway, there it is. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. I thought it was rather entertaining. Kept me awake for an hour. Anyway, pray for the country. Pray for one another. Get involved. Make your voice heard. Share the program. Tell people about it. And if you'd like to help support the program, you can Venmo us Danny-Thompson-02380. You don't have to, but hey, if you got an extra $5 million laying around, go ahead, send it over. We'll get a background. Wouldn't that be great? Anyway, thanks for watching. Share it, watch it, tell people what's going on. We'll see you tomorrow.